So Cricket Life Stories with me, Neel Khagram. Today we're joined by Mark Robinson. How you doing, Mark?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good.
So we're going to do a little coaching piece. Mark, you're going to give us some top tips. Before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about your background, obviously in terms of your playing career, Northants, Yorkshire and Sussex, before making the move into coaching. Talk us through it.
Oh, crikey. I suppose everybody's got a story, and everybody's got a background which contributes to where you end up, really. And I come from a teaching background. My mum's a teacher, was a teacher, and my sister's a teacher now. And I would have probably been a teacher too. I went to teacher training college for about 2 months until I got my first contract. So I always had a passion, I suppose, to developing others and working with young people as well. So I suppose I had the gene as such. And from a cricketing point of view, obviously, well, sporting point of view, I love my sport. I was lucky enough to become a professional. But like a lot of people, the journey is never quite straightforward. And a couple of things that impacted on me, which I think has affected me as a coach, was I came from Hull in Yorkshire, which is a big city. It's 120 miles away from Leeds, in terms of a round trip. And I used to get picked up from 4 o'clock from school by my mum or my dad, or both of them, and then took through, down the M62, M1, into through the town centre at Leeds at rush hour, flying there at 6 o'clock. And it was quite a bind for my mum and dad, but I never, as kids don't, when you're 14, 15, you don't appreciate the sacrifice your parents are making, do you? And I hated it as well. I got there and I find the atmosphere and the environment quite austere, and I'm quite introverted in new environments, so I found it hard to express myself. Everybody seemed to know everybody. I was the only one from my area, and the else seemed to come from Leeds, Bradford, Sheffield. So going in the car was probably that brat from hell, having not had a great experience, and I did that for 3 or 4 years. And what it made me realise was, or what it made me think, I think, down the line, was how important the environment is. And I think, without really knowing it, I made a decision that I'd never want an environment that I could influence to feel like that. I'd always want anybody new who comes into a team that I was associated to be welcomed and made a fuss of as such, and not to feel like the outsider and to make it cold. And it also, and again, totally in hindsight, made me really appreciate my parents. And unfortunately, sometimes we appreciate our parents when it's too late, the sacrifices. And no comprehension of what they must have been able to get off work early to be able to pick up me at 3:30, get me through to Leeds, get me back at 9:30 at night, etc., and then do a full day's work the next day for 4 years, twice a week. They really impacted on me, and probably has still impacted me on as a coach. And then the other thing, I was a good pro, played 15 years. I was only a journeyman, really. Did okay though, without ever really getting to those high skills. But I've got dodgy eyes. My eyes don't work together, they work independently. I've got no 3D vision. So, and again, I was only when I started to go a bit further into my career, I realised that how that impacted on me. And obviously, not to have 3D vision and your eyes not to work together isn't the ideal thing as a professional sportsman, especially when it comes to judging length. And I think what that did for me, I had a couple of times in my career where I had to get on with it. I knew what I had, and some of the handicaps and disability is too strong a word I had, but there's a couple of times when you think, well, shit, this is what I've got. I've got to make the best of this and get on with it. You can't, the only other option is giving in. So I think that helped me again was when I was a coach. First of all, I know what it's like to battle, to suffer, to not be perfect. I know what it's like to shit yourself in the field. I know what it's like to feel at times inadequate. But equally, I know you've got no choice but to find a way. Otherwise, the only other way is out, really. So I think those life lessons, from my cricketing point of view, helped again me as a coach.
And then let's talk through your time at Sussex, winning the championship twice. Proud moment, golden period, etc.
Yeah, look, I was, I retired to take up the second team assistant coach role end of 2001. Did 5 years as assistant to Pete Moores, running the second team, which is great learning experience. And I think sometimes coaches get rushed in too quick. You've got to do your yards and get your like a player, you get your experience. And to work like that was brilliant alongside Keith Greenfield, who was academy director, and to cut my teeth into it really. And then the end of the 2005 season, Pete went off to do the England Academy, and I took over. And initially it was quite daunting because Pete was a bit of a legend at the club. We'd won our first championship ever in 2003. We hadn't won anything at that point, but we had a decent team. And, you're bitten all with him. And then at the end of the 2005 season, Ian Ward came to me, our England opener, to tell me that he was leaving to take Sky full time. Timmy Ambrose came to me, they were really promising wicket-keeper batter. He was playing at that point in the team as a batter only. To say, look, you've got an offer from Warwickshire for the gloves, to take the gloves as well as bat high. And, he wants to stay, but he needs the gloves. And at that point, Matt Fry had the gloves. So we lost Timmy. And James Kirtley had just got banned for, unfortunately, deemed to have an illegal action. So that was my starting point, which was quite daunting that winter. Lost an international, lost James Kirtley, who'd got previously that summer 75 wickets, and lost one of our most promising young batters and keepers in Timmy Ambrose. So it was quite daunting, but then you're doing the job, aren't you? And you're off and running. And we had a great first season. We did the double 2006, and like you said, we went on a good little run, especially when you've got like Mushtaq in your team. But we had a good team. And then, like everything, you start to go into transition. But we became more of a dominant in the one-day cricket as opposed to the red ball. And we had, overall in my 9 years as head coach, we did okay, especially for a county the size of Sussex.
And then you had England Lions involvement, and then England Women's. Talk us through it. World Cup success at home, head coach at Lord's. Proudest moment in your career?
I don't know, it's very difficult to say that, because some of your proudest moments are the things that are headlines. When you watch, something like Chris Jordan, when, he's been sacked by Surrey and you take him on and, what he's doing now. The transition of Tammy Beaumont out of the team to, 2017, she was playing the tournament. They're really, really proud moments for you, but you've seen a player's journey and you've played your small part. But in terms of actual events, it's got to be up there, doesn't it? To win a World Cup at home, and we were under quite a bit of pressure, and the ECB had put us under some pressure, not deliberately, but everybody was fully aware of the magnitude of the home, having a home World Cup and what it meant to women's cricket. This was deemed to be a great opportunity to further launch women's sport, women's cricket in front of our own audiences, and to catapult the game forward. And what you couldn't afford to do was for the team to blow up and fill. So there was a bit of expectation pressure which we had to manage, but then to have that day out at Lord's, full house, 20-odd thousand. The only empty seats really were the members where they hadn't turned up, touts outside. Yeah, it was a special time, and the only sadness was that my mum and dad couldn't be there.
And then the following year, 2018, didn't quite get over the line in the T20 World Final. Just talk us through your journey in terms of putting that side together that ultimately won the World Cup in the longer format and then reached the final in the shorter T20. That whole journey, everyone sees the day out in the final, but it's a lot of hard work and that goes on in the back. Talk us through it.
Yeah, there was, and you do, don't you, with your team? Had a great support team. But we did. We planned for that final a long way out. I remember one of the first presentations well, it was the first presentation we did to the whole squad in watching the scream in South Africa, and I labelled it from Potch to Lords. It starts here, and that would have been what, February 2016. So we planned it. We went when the season 2017 came up. We went to Lords twice. We went once in February because the girls don't go to Lords. One or two would play. We don't spend any time there. So I would reckon 90% of the squad had never played there. So we took them and we did the Lords tour, which was brilliant as a group. We had a good meeting in the dressing room, a good chat. We got Alex Anson, the England ladies hockey player, to come, and she spoke to us about how they as a team handled the expectation of a home World Cup, given the expectation we're going to run there. And then again, we went back in May, did a whole training day at Lords again. Trying to get used to the slopes, netted there, and again just familiarising ourselves around the ground, because what I wanted was, we were planning to be at Lords, not planning to lose in a semi-final, but once we got there, I didn't want us to be overawed. And the team as well, the changes we made, we made a change with the captaincy, another senior player, and we did it with a view to try and give some of the younger players time to try and have a better chance of being ready for the 2017 World Cup. So for it all to come off, and in some ways I actually felt it might have been a bit early for that team, but we got enough things right, and we were never the best teams in terms of you never felt you could smash somebody and take your foot off the gas because you had all the bases covered. But what we had was a great belief going, some very, very good players, and players who were prepared to play with a bit of freedom, and that can get you a long way.
And then in terms of your own personal journey, in terms of leaving the side and to what you're doing now, can you talk us through that?
Well, I mean, it's difficult because in terms of where England was as a team from a women's point of view, I mean, I got brought in to help them transition from the amateur days as such to the fully professional. They've been professional for 2 years, so I had a distinct brief to try and increase that awareness of what it means to be professional. What's the dirty side of it that you've got no choice to get done, but equally how to cope with the pressures and the tensions and not lose sight of who you are as a person. That was my job as such. And in some ways we've always been 5 or 6 years in terms of structurally behind Australia. Look where the women's England set up now. They're just going professional in terms of the 6 franchises that they've created. And, Australia been fully professional for 5 years, but in 2017 we caught Australia a bit cold because we came in and we were playing a different type of cricket. We were braver. We were playing more 360, more expansively. And Australia were a little bit asleep and got caught cold. But they woke up, as all good teams do that are well led and got an outstanding coach themselves. So we went after that to the Ashes away, and we drew 2-2, well 4-4, which was a great achievement because we were behind the 8 ball a lot of the time. But Australia was starting to play differently, copy to a degree, more innovative, and they've got more players. So, we probably had a talent pool of about 18 professionals, and they had 110, 115. With all their states being fully professional. So it was a case of just trying to make sure we keep growing and not losing sight. But as I say, Australia went past us and then gave it as much as well as we did. We got a bit of a hammering in that last Ashes, and I think from everybody's point of view, it was probably time for myself to have another change of direction, and I'd had a great time as well. So. And it's been good. It's been just about a year now since I left the women's game, and I've worked freelance since then, which has been good. I've done a lot of work with some counties, mainly mentoring coaches, which has been great. A little bit of work with England Deaf, a couple of the associate countries, and then lockdown comes, doesn't it? So all that then stops. And it's the last month or so, I've just got going with some private coaching. I want to get back in at the right job, be it men's or women's, in the right job full time again.
Perfect, Mark. Can't wait to get into your specific tips for coaching? Can't wait to hear it. Let's get into it now.
Okay, I suppose first of all, the coaching philosophy was centered around what you believe in, isn't it? And it can sound a bit cliche, but ultimately it's about the person. And as a coach, you've got to try and make it about the person, because you're in charge of a team sport, but you're coaching individuals. So I suppose my coaching philosophy, my personal one, is, as I say, is to make sure I'm always considering who I'm coaching, the context in which I'm coaching in, and trying to bring the player through matching the situation he's in. A lot of talk around this word clarity, and for me it's sometimes just a word. What does clarity mean? What you want to do is and it also depends on what format you're playing. I mean, ultimately you want your batters to score runs, your bowlers to get wickets and go for as least runs as you can, and the fielders to catch it, run them out, stop the ball. The game's quite very, very simple, and sometimes we want to make it more complicated. But in terms of clarity in roles, especially in one-day cricket, in terms of what the expectation is on each player, in terms of how hard to go, how not to go, and you're trying to match roles to players' strengths and to players' character as well. But I think sometimes it's a cop-out. Having enough clarity what the role is. What you learn as a coach is players will, and I was the same. I played for a long time. Players love an excuse. Players love to pass the buck on from their, as I did, from your feelings on to a coach. The game's simple. Your job is to score more runs than the opposition. Your job is to win games, and that's what you can't get away with. If you're an opening batter, get your team off to a good start. If it's 4-day cricket, Test match cricket, get your team off to a good start, and then if you're in, you go on. If you're in the middle order, you continue to work on the openers or you rescue. It's relatively obvious half the time what the role is. The coach's job sometimes is to make it crystal clear, but it's an equal responsibility of the player to ask and seek clarity, and the coach to give clarity where possible. I think in terms of your own personal roles, I think this is where your coach-captain relationship comes in. You've got to work out quickly what you're responsible for and what the captain wants responsibility for. So a different type of captains. They've had a young captain in Heather Knight who's learned the roles, and as she went on, she sought and took more responsibility. I gave her more responsibility. At the beginning, you couldn't have expected her to do the same type of things. When I took over at Sussex, I had a very experienced captain in Chris Adams, who was very good at running the dressing room, but he didn't really want to do the training days. So that was my responsibility. I'd run the training days, the pre-match prep. Chris would run the dressing room. And as I say, it's important to know your own responsibilities, and you've got to dovetail that with the captain. And lots of coaches will have different ways of doing it. Some coaches don't want to be that much hands-on on the training. They might give that to the assistant. The key bit is you as a head coach know what you want to do, what you want to be responsible for, and you make sure your assistants are equally clear what they're responsible for and what they're going to do on a match day, training day. And likewise, you've dovetailed with the captain, you've talked things through areas of responsibility. So there's no competition with egos, and there's no clashes or conflicting messages to players. So that's really important. You probably would start with the captain, then you work with your support staff, trying to get everybody clear as you can. As a head coach, ultimately you're responsible. You've got to know that you're responsible for making those players better. Lots of different theories on honesty, clarity of messages against that word clarity, and it becomes, I say, more of a cliche. But in terms of the hardest job from a coach is leaving a player out. And then, well, it's not actually the hardest job. Is when you release somebody from your contract, and then it's when you leave somebody out. And what I believe in, you always front up to the decision, especially the releasing of a player. I'd always, if that was my decision, I'd front up and want to speak to them individually. In terms of leaving somebody out of the team, depending on the captaincy, I'd try and do majority of it, but sometimes I would share that a little bit with the captain who's quite good So ultimately, all the teams that I've personally coached, from the England women with Heather Knight to Chris Adams, Michael Yardy, Joyce, Michael Yardy, Joyce, Jonathan Trott when I did Lions, Chris Wokes when I did the Lions, all of them had last say on selection. And every team I've been involved in, if there's ever a slight disagreement or conflict, in my opinion, the captain has a last say on selection. So sometimes it's good for the captain to pass on that message, but the message has got to be consistent between the both of you, and it's got to be pretty clear as well. I think, again, sometimes you're allowed to say, actually, you're not playing today. It's not actually, my gut feel is so-and-so's a better bet on this wicket. There is no real science. It's just my gut feel. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. I don't know, we're going to play an extra spinner, an extra seamer. We want to play an extra all-rounder. Or likewise, sometimes, look, your numbers aren't adding up at the moment. We think it's time for a change. We need to change the batting order, change the personnel. And unfortunately, you're the man that's going to miss out. And what you want to do at the right moment, it's sometimes not at that given time, is again to revisit with a player if he has been left out, and try to tell him or explain to him how he can come back in, what is needed to do. I mean, in terms of the responsibilities for a coach, and again, different organisations will give you different responsibilities, and sometimes there's a vacuum and you end up doing lots of different things. So when I was at Sussex, we had no director of cricket, and the longer I was in that role, the more I was getting dragged away from a bit of why you started, which was a hands-on coaching. So I was head coach at Sussex for 9 years. I did the budget, I did the signing of the players, I had to deal with the agents, the planning, everything. And then you get dragged into the management meeting from the club's point of view, and you're onto this subgroup, etc. And as I say, it takes you away. At different clubs, it's different. And the more experienced your support staff. I do England Lions. I've got Kevin Shine as a bowling coach, Mark Ramprakash or Graham Thorpe as a back coach, and Peter Such is there as a spin coach. So you're not doing that hands-on bit. So you're a little bit more helicopter and overseeing it, coaching the players sometimes for the other coaches. So it will vary a lot, and that's what I always go back to. It's been really clear what you're responsible. But ultimately, we'll always go back to trying to get the best out of individual players. And as everybody knows, with the different personalities, different backgrounds, religions, overseas, local, etc., I'm trying to understand him and make the environment safe for him, which I think is really important. It's going to be safe for everybody. And you try to twist it and manoeuvre it for so each player can feel safe and prosper and thrive in it. But equally, there's enough challenge in there that nobody gets safe. I think in terms of the two formats of the game, your approach is relatively similar. The challenge you get, if it's county cricket, is the two formats can mix quite quickly. So 1 minute you're in the middle of a 4-day game, and you've got a T20 game in 2 days' time, and trying to prep your players or get yourself ready statistically, that's a challenge. So you need your support staff to kick in. So that turnover can be really, really hard. When I did England Lions and when I did the England Women, the beauty of being in international cricket, there's no excuse for not doing plan, do and review. So you have got a chance to review what's just happened and plan what is going to happen, and put good plans in place, etc. There's no excuse. County cricket is a lot harder because you're chopping formats and travelling on the night of games and playing the next day and all that type of thing. So it is a different type of challenge. But the players are the same. They'll have the same insecurities, just different insecurities. And like you said, all you're trying to do all the time is to try and take away excuses from the players, try and make them as clear as you can, and being very consistent, if you can, again, about how we're going to play, how you want them to play. I think, of course, if you talk about a top tip, let your players know how they're being judged. I think that's really, 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 really important. How you're judging them. The media will judge them one way. The stats will always judge them, but how you as a head coach are judging them. It's important that, I don't know, if you do your processes, you do this and this is this, I will back you, because I'll think we're going to score runs if you're consistently doing these things. I think that's really important for the coach to We really let the player know how he's judging them, and the player to know how he's being judged. So if it's one day cricket and we want to be 55 or 4 off the power play of 6 overs, you know there's a risk you're going to get out doing it at times, and the coach isn't going to mind because he's given the player the license. If he gets out doing it, he's going to be back to go and do it again. Because the target is 55 or 5 overs, that's what you're going for. I think you're going to get that more and more now with players in the men's world anyway, going to so many franchise competitions, and players move around a lot more. So I do think players are going to get coaches that they can trust from a technical point of view, that they'll want to go to when they're in trouble. And from a head coach's point of view, or my point of view, because sometimes, you know, I've been a head coach the last 9 years. This last 6 months, I've been more of a skills coach. And they're different roles completely, but you can't have an ego. As I say, it's never about you as a coach, it's about the player. What is important is if I'm at a county or with a team and the player is working with somebody else outside of us, that myself and the other coach are communicating. You don't want conflicting messages. And also, especially if he's going to spend 75% of the time with us, we need to make sure we're on the same hymn sheet. There's no point going off on a tangent, but 100%, it's healthy sometimes to get other opinions and everything. And sometimes players, and again, I was the same. Sometimes, you know, it's like, you know, like the comfy slippers that you want, and you just get that reassurance by seeing somebody that spent a lot of time with you. And I might not necessarily say anything different, but it's just how they say it. And they're non-threatening as well. And that's the other thing, when that coach you worked with back in the past are non-threatening you, because they're not dropping you, they're not signing the length of your contract, and that makes it a safe place to sometimes the player to talk about his insecurities. Look, we've got to be careful when we talk about coaching, because it's so broad and there's so many different types. So, as I say, you know, a batting specialist, a bowling specialist has different responsibilities to a team coach, a performance coach. So if you're a head coach or you're in charge of the second team at a county, you're more responsible. Yes, you're responsible for the development of the players, but you're responsible for performance as well. So performance as a head coach, ultimately performance first, development close. If you're a skills coach, yes, you're partially responsible to the performance of the team, because if your players improve and play well, then obviously that will impact on the overall result of the team. But ultimately, you're there to make the players better. So there's different roles, and that coaches play at different times. So there'll be different pressures and different stresses. As a head coach, look, losing's hard, and losing runs is hard. And sometimes things are out of your control. I think that's, I don't know. There was a time we had a bad time at Sussex. We got relegated, and we had loads of injuries. The Ashes, when we're getting done by Australia. And sometimes it's very difficult because you can't actually affect as much as you want, and everything you try is not particularly working. And that's where sometimes you've got to give yourself a break as a head coach. But that's tough, because if a player, I think nobody feels a defeat more than a player, more than the head coach. Because when you're a player, you might score runs and lose. So at least you have some personal satisfaction. When you're head coach, you don't care who scores runs, takes wickets. You just want the results, and just happy for everybody if you win. So the danger is you can feel it too much, and that's where, as a head coach, you've got to learn through experience to be able to give yourself a break and accept that sometimes some things, you know, you can't affect. So that Ashes series, which I'm at peace with myself, did everything. We've moved as a team, but not enough. Things happen that were out of my control, and if I was in the role now, my job would have been part of to put layers in place and things in place for that team to move again and bridge that gap to Australia like we had before. But it's difficult at the time when you're in a losing streak. And I suppose lastly, I'll go back to the hardest literal thing you'll ever do as a head coach is when you end somebody's career. You have to tell them. And some players will take it really badly and emotionally. Some players will take it better than others, but there's nothing worse than having somebody sat in front of you and telling you that news that, you know, it's no longer going to be a professional sportsman. Look, being a player, being a coach, head coach, it's been with people, it's been with the dressing room, it's sharing big moments, losses to a degree. It's sharing experiences with people you like. You know, you become a family because you're spending cricket so much time with people. So from my point of view, I've done. I've been in professional sports since I was 18. I'm 53 now, and I've loved every minute because I've had some great experiences. So I've been all around the world. So I've had some great dressing room moments, won some trophies, cried as we've lost, etc. That's what the game's about. That's what sport's about. Whether you're a head coach or player, I think it is the same. It is the same. You live for the dressing room. You live for those moments, highs and lows. And you need the lows to really make you appreciate those highs.